Hello, and welcome to the 2020 series presented by the New York Film Academy. The 2020 series are conversations with creative visionaries about craft, creativity, and collaboration. So we're going to have 20 minutes of shop talk and then 20 minutes of answering questions from you guys, the global audience. So please write in. I'm Liz Hinlein. I am a film director and creative director at New York Film Academy. And I am thrilled and a little starry-eyed to have with us today, the amazing DP, Patrick Capone. Hello, Patrick.
How are you?
Great, we did it.
Look at us. We are.
You're coming down from overexposure. I love it. Very nice.
An effect I've been working on for years.
Exactly. How to get Zoom to overexposure.
It's the pandemic.
So I am such a fangirl of Succession, and you do such a beautiful, amazing job. Did you have to audition for that? How did that come about for you, that show?
That's a good question. I had worked with Adam McKay in the past. I had shot some second units for him. The most recent up to Succession was The Big Chill. And not The Big Chill, I'm sorry, The Big Short. Big Short, is that right?
Big Short,
and,
Big Short, yeah.
And he directed the pilot, and he was the executive producer. And when Andre was going to move on to direct, they were looking for DPs, and I had gotten the phone call, and I can only guess that my name was thrown into the hat because of that relationship and other things I had done. So it wasn't really an audition. There was several meetings and things like that.
So how did you prepare for those meetings? Because it wasn't just a one and done, was it?
No, it was several. The same way I prepare for everything. Honesty, read the scripts. I was able to see the pilot. I brought to it what I thought I can add to it and what I felt about what they had. And I happened to have liked very much what they had. So it was easy to segue into what.
There was a slight freezing dropout situation.
Are you frozen?
You were frozen.
I'm frozen. Here we go.
We're doing it. We're doing it. It's fine. So when you go in as a DP you're taking it over something that someone already shot. Where's the line between what you think is like, what is the special sauce that you're looking to bring that would, and especially if they're talking to other people, what are you looking to add, I guess?
Well, when you're talking about the fact that they're talking to other people, at this level, everyone is qualified to execute what has to be done. It's how you feel about the script. It's how you feel about what you can bring as a craftsman and a person to these situations. I was very fortunate that the things that I really liked in the show were things that we had done in the past on The Big Short, this type of camera movement. And I knew that the idea of Succession was almost not quite photojournalist, but a fly on the wall and less cinema. And I've always wanted to do something like that. I started as a still photographer in college, shooting rock and roll and sports. So I've always wanted to approach something that was less cinema, less masters, over the shoulders, singles, which I think get a little boring to do and a little boring for the crew, for the audience.
Interesting. And so did you have to create, just was curious, did you have to create like a lookbook or anything, or this was all just conversation?
All just conversation.
All just conversation.
We always use reference photos. The first director that I had worked with on Succession was Adam Arkin. So we had a good 2 to 3 week prep, and we were able to together continue that look and bring a little bit of cinema to it.
And so when you're talking cinema, are you identifying it with the lighting? Are you identifying it with the lensing?
In this situation, probably more with the lighting. We had some huge banquet scenes that we were able to make very warm and appealing. And we had the Thanksgiving Day dinner that we were able to, I thought, make, and we transitioned that on a Thanksgiving Day from midday to dusk to evening. So that was fun. So most of that cinema that we talk about, we try and find a spot in succession where we can slow the audience down and give them a breather, where maybe the shots don't move so much and maybe it's more about establishing a scene or a location, not in the traditional establishing, like other movies, in our establishing way, but a little more stylized.
And did the methodology of shooting on film, and as we were talking earlier, and not having marks and stuff like that, was that something already baked in?
Yes, I was surprised that after the pilot, they stayed with film. I was very happy, but I was surprised.
And tell me about the experience of shooting on film, something that feels like it would easily, the producers push for video for that.
Well, I've been doing this a while. So I've, 3/4 of my career was all film, whether it be as an assistant or an operator, second unit. One of the beauties of film, besides the look of it and the textures of highlights and windows and all of that, is the discipline of film. Because you have only 12, 14 minutes, you don't have a 30-minute card. And we do our scenes from the opening word to the final word. So we do not have the ability to stop in between of a take and have someone give screen direction or stage direction or writer or director notes. There's a feeling on our set that when you do the slate, we're ready to go. And it focuses everyone up. Gets me out of the DIT tent. It keeps me on the set with the crew, with my gaffer and grip. I do have headsets to our operators and assistants. But there's a certain part of film that is lost other than just exposing the negative. There's a discipline and I don't want to say professionalism, but there's certainly a discipline of being on film that I feel you don't have with digital. And I think that makes a big difference for the cast and for the directors and us. And
then are you calling into the labs at night, or are you sending an image for, like, how are they doing some one pass of a color correction, or how's that working?
Well, we have a LUT that was created back on the pilot. So the negative is developed and then it's transferred as per that LUT. And we get to see, 2 days later, we get to see some still grabs that'll be emailed to us in the morning. And those are pretty accurate. If we have some issues that maybe some things were not interpreted properly or sleight of hand, we will re-transfer it, but that very rarely happens. One of the other things that we do is occasionally I will send a iPhone photograph or a digital photograph from my still camera. If we're doing something out of the ordinary, I would send it to Josh Oliver, our colorist, our overnight colorist. And then we do a grayscale at the beginning of each scene, and we do that in 3200 or 5400 light, so that any manipulation we do isn't taken out by the lab.
Right, 100%, 100%. And I'm just curious, so every time you do a take, you run it A to Z?
Pretty much.
The scene?
The scene A to Z.
So, because there's so many shots and a lot of them, I would love to look at a scene with you, and there's so many characters. is there a design that goes in with you and the director in the beginning? Like on this scene, it's because we want the editor to have that moment of whatever's reaction. You know, I'm just curious, how do you know if you're shooting from, it's 2 cameras?
Always 2 cameras.
How you make sure you cover the reaction that you think is going to be the one that's going to charge the scene the most?
Well,
Is that decided? Or is that decided at all?
Show, and that's the talent that we have around us, our operators and everyone. We discuss in philosophy the scene, and we'll have, certainly we know the words, but when there are 4 or 5 family members and subcast people, we know the sub-stories and the subplots. I mean, the ones I love is there's always a great look between Jerry and Shiv when they're discussing the roles of women in business. I mean, Connor and Logan and Kendall can be talking about it, but there's always these 2 women, they come from different generations. So there's always that story that's playing. There's always the rivalry of the children. So the director and myself will have a discussion after we see the blocking, which one of our formats work best for this? Is it long lens on dollies where we create an L shape so that we can do a side and a front? Is it handheld? Our operators work beautifully on these butt dollies that they can maneuver their bodies around and get around people at a dinner table and be able to throw the focus to the foreground and put themselves in position. Is it that format? Once we decide that, we'll decide which part of the scene is most important to get first. And unlike other things I've worked on, we try and do the performance first, tight, and we work our way out.
Oh, wow, that's very
so that by the time the scene has been played, the cast might not be quite as fresh. So then you can drop back and do the wider work where you can't really tell they're not fresh.
That's very interesting. And then was that always in place, or did that come about after?
That's Mark Mylod. Pretty much that's his MO. And the cast loves it, and I love it, and we get going, and we get down to, we're all fresh in the beginning.
Right, for the important close-ups. Charlie, let's play this scene, and then I would love to hear Patrick talk about, just the strategies of the approach when he was reading the script.
It's a nice color.
I've decided.
Ken? Come on, really? Dad, no. There's... What about one of the shit fuckers?
Hey, it's okay. Guys, you're off the hook.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
And is it just, I don't want to be rude, just him?
Yeah, are there any additionals?
First, second-born son. With your responsibilities, it will be a very simple sell.
Roman, you're taking over as full chief operating officer.
Oh, yeah? What, with fucking Captain Cautious back in the next room?
No, Frank's going to be responsible for the cruises cleanup. You're on your own. Solo. Can you handle it?
Well, yeah. Yeah, Dad, that's really exciting.
No, Rome. It's great.
Okay, guys, eat up. This one's on me.
Okay. It's so alive. It so has such great tension and
Doesn't it?
oomph. So, was this approach similarly where you started in close and kept going back?
Yes, but this also had a few more complicated things to it. The scene previous is Kendall and Logan in the stateroom, and it's supposed to be the beginning of dusk. And we wanted this dinner scene that we just saw to go from dusk to night. So we had a window of, an hour and a half where we can play around, and we were able to do wider shots later when the skies were in certain density. But one of the things, this is maybe an 8-page scene, script-wise. And to do that maybe 10 times, and then you're done. So we would shoot toward the back of the boat, and then shoot toward the front, and one camera on each side at each time. So you don't always have to be head on for the reactions. Some of the reactions that work very well in profile when they're secondary reactions, and their reactions, Tom and Shiv together. So those, you can get away with those side angles and not always have to be head on. So we ran the scene probably 10 times in 2 different setups with 2 cameras. And we knew that the light would change in each one. And Mark and the editors, and we know that, and we don't go in panicked that they're going to go from the night to dawn to daytime back to night. We just grade it, and they cut it in a way that makes sense, and you can get away with.
And how challenging was it to shoot with your crew on a boat?
Very challenging. I mean, actually it was amazing. We'd be brought out by Zodiacs, and we'd load all the equipment on the boat. And as big as that boat was, it got very small very quickly. So everyone stayed on board. We didn't have people leave for hair and makeup. Everything took place on board. We would shoot through lunch, and then we'd be done, and we would systematically leave the boat. I learned how to use my iPhone to steer the boat in the right direction using my compass on my iPhone between the second AD and myself, and asking the captain to point it into the sun or 40 degrees from the sun. And we would do that all day long, just kind of maneuver that. So
you're maneuvering the boat, so you're backlighting people.
Back off, yeah, depending on
wherever you wanted it. That's cool. That is redirecting the sun. That's
challenging.
Cool.
It was challenging.
I bet. And where was this shot?
Off the coast of Croatia, in Croatia.
Oh, wow.
Muzet Islands, off of Kosovo. I mean, we literally loaded the boat. We did a scene loading the boat. And then once the equipment and the cast were on the boat, we started shooting from the harbor and on the boat of the ship, the yacht pulling out. And then once we got that part of the scene, the 2 cameras on land were picked up in Zodiacs and brought back onto the boat. And then we shot as we moved to our resting location that night.
That's exciting. So I have one more question on that, and then I want to move to some of our Q&As. We have a lot of them. So when you were faced with a whole new crew that you pick up when you're in Europe, what is your, I guess, how would you classify your DP style? We were talking about Rodrigo Prieto, who has a very certain smooth style to him. What do you consider your style, do you think?
Well, fortunately, production, HBO allows us to bring our operators and our assistants, because they're so much a part of the ensemble. So I shot in London, I shot in Croatia, I shot in Italy, so I have to find grip and electric. And by networking with DPs that I've worked with and who's available, that dialogue then starts with them understanding that we shoot in 250 degrees. We could shoot in 250 degrees. And our schemes have to be either pushing light from outside or top light. And then I share a lot of the grabs that I would get every morning from dailies. I would select some lighting setups and dolly moves and camera moves to show the grips. And we would grow from that. And I'm very fortunate that in New York, in London, in Croatia, in Italy, our style was embraced, and everyone brought something to it. Everybody really understood what we wanted to do and improved it.
So it sounds like you're a collaborative.
Oh, very much so.
Head of department.
I'd still be a still photographer if I was not collaborative.
That's great. That's great. Can you speak on that a little bit more about that, for as opposed to being like the king of the departments?
Listen, everyone got in this business because not most people got in this business because they're filmmakers. Okay, and they have great eyes. They've worked with other DPs that are far more talented than I am. And why shouldn't I tap into those resource sources when I have, Seamus McGarvey's gaffer or his grip, or, these people. If you let people do their job and you have not even guide them, have a conversation with them as to what your vision is, they will help you and enhance it for you.
Yeah.
And listen, sometimes you have to say, directors have to say it to me. I have to say it to crew members. That's not our movie. We're not going to go down that path. That's not our language. Let's stay with, I know what the succession language is, and unfortunately it's not that. Let's dial it back a little bit and let's go back to what we have. And everyone wants to be involved. Everyone wants to be a part of this project. When I loaded magazines and did slates, I felt like I was one of the most important people on the film because I could scratch the film in the darkroom or expose it. So I always took pride, and I know that crew members and filmmakers throughout the world take pride in this. And you have to enhance it, embrace it.
That's great. That's a great way to look at it. So we have some interesting questions. Hassan asks, it's like, Dear Abby, I am 36-year-old TV broadcast cameraman. Am I too late to start my career in filmmaking, or is it worth it? Or is it worth a try?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You learn something in broadcast that you would bring to a film set. My B camera operator was one of the original operators on Survivor.
Oh, wow.
And I think one of the reasons why he's a great hunter as a camera operator is because he had that kind of broadcast guerrilla filmmaking in the jungle or wherever they were. Never too late. Never too late to move forward, because you take all that experience with you.
Exactly. And how do you find people now are moving up from, because you were also assistant AC, how are they moving up to DP these days? Is it do they have to shoot their own stuff, or?
Well, it's a lot different than when I was younger. When I left film school, there wasn't even MTV. There was no music videos. In New York City, there were maybe a Woody Allen film and maybe some films that came in from California, and one TV show, maybe, whatever it was, Kodak or whatever. So I didn't have much of a choice if I wanted to get into the film business, but to start as a loader and a second assistant, and then work as a first assistant. And at that time, I had started a family, and I really had no desire to go to LA. And I was very fortunate that I kept busy. And when my time was right in that era, I moved up. I moved up to first assistant operating, and then I would use my operating skills. When people wanted me to work as an operator, I'd say, I'm not operating films anymore, but if you want me to do B camera, I'll do it if you allow me to shoot splinter units and second units. So that was my bargaining chip to getting to being DP. Tak Fujimoto did that with me on M. Night Shyamalan films early on. So that was a bargaining chip that I had.
Right.
Nowadays, you can shoot a film on an iPhone. a very good film on an iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you should. It's all about the scripts and the direction and how you treat the image. You know, people ask me these Apple 13 commercials or whatever they are, where they shoot a scene on a film, on a camera. And they go, do you feel threatened by that? I said, not at all, because they're not just pointing the camera at this scene, they're lighting it. They're production designer, they're giving it their input, their intellectual bit. It's not just pick up an iPhone and do it. You can make a bad phone on an iPhone. You can make a bad movie on an iPhone. You can make a good one.
Yeah, exactly. But do you think, with that said, and that it's so accessible, let's say for the equipment and everything like that, that mentorship, learning from the greats, which your career path took you through, is getting diluted, let's say?
Well, I hope not. I mean, it's, you know, I teach a little bit at NYU, and I tell these students, you need to get out of here and you need to continue your education. And you continue your education on a film set. You learn, you watch gaffers and grips treat lights. You watch a DP have a and you listen to that conversation between the DP and a director that is priceless as to why the camera is in a certain place. Why is the camera moving? Why is the camera not moving? Why is the camera at this height and not this height? And when I came out of film school and I was standing next to directors and DPs having that conversation, it was priceless. And I knew what they were talking about because I had come out of film school.
Right.
But to answer your question, if I was leaving film school now, I would shoot, and then shoot. And then I would surround myself and try and get onto productions where I can still learn from people that have been doing it for decades.
And what are like some of the seminal cinematographers that you have hurt your heart, you know, that have warmth towards, that you learn so much from?
Well, Nestor Almendros. I assisted Nestor on one of his last films, Billy Bathgate. I've worked with Vilmos, Laszlo Kovacs gave me my first operating job. Tak Fujimoto, who I assisted, later thought of me to shoot second units for him. You know, in New York City at that time, this is going to get a little political and detailed, foreign DPs really could not shoot in Los Angeles. The Los Angeles local was very strict. In New York, we allowed Billy Williams, we allowed Andrzejczyk, we allowed Nestor Almendros, people like this to come into New York City and shoot. So there were some big films that I was enlightened to and exposed to very early on. I worked on Kramer versus Kramer for free. Wow. And I was in the union because I was in the union a year and no one knew who I was because I had come out of film school, as opposed to other traditional ways of getting into the local IA.
Right.
So I offered my time, and Nestor was amazing. He offered to, he looked at my thesis film. He would answer any question. But all of those people were very approachable, and just watching them work was an education. With the gaffers that had gone decades, you know, people like Dickie Quinlan, who, you know, gaffed The Exorcist, and I got to work with him later on with Andrzejczyk. You have to be a sponge.
Exactly. And because it sounds like there's not necessarily like the lesson that you learn, the specific lesson, but it's more like the approach, the languaging.
The languaging.
How do you walk into a location? What are you looking at first?
Right.
That type of thing. This is an interesting question. Antonio asked, if the director chooses the camera lenses, is it considered an infringement on the DP's duties?
Depends who the director is and how talented that director is with choosing lenses. There are many types of directors. Some are very hands-on and have a great eye, and they know exactly the language of cinematography. There are others that might not and rely on you to bring that to it. The European way is the camera operator, and the English way is the camera operator and the director would have that conversation. David Watkin, who I worked with, would rely so much to the operator, and he would deal with the lighting and things like that. So there's no simple answer to that question. I don't take anything that they bring to the table as threatening or they've crossed the line. It's their movie. You know, if I want to be that paranoid about what lenses are chosen, I would go out and direct my own movie. But you're there to help the director take those words and these actions and tell his story. And this is what pre-production is all about. You choose film grabs, you choose artwork, you choose still photography, you choose old movies, and you make a plan as to the pace, the look, the style, the color, the palette, and along with production designer, wardrobe, and you make that palette, and everyone executes it, from gaffer, grip, everyone.
And then, so the same way you're happy with the director speaking directly to the camera operators, let's say.
Oh, I'm more than happy. What I am careful of, you have to be careful not, and many DPs will tell you this, you have to be careful that the camera operator has your best interest, because there are times when a director might ask to shoot a close-up at 250 millimeters while you're doing a wider shot. And you might not be ready. You might not have cleaned up that close-up for someone.
Right.
Our operators are phenomenal visionaries. They know when a shot would get me in trouble and when it will not, and they avoid it, and they find shots. We have a whole thing about light, dark, light, dark. If someone is not lit, but if you put them in front of something bright, that modeling of their face, you can get away with it. Maybe not on every style, but on our style we can, because that's that kind of photojournalism thing that we go for. And
do you get like, what type of scenes excite you these days? Is it the big things, or is it the more intimate, less characters on screen?
All of them. Yeah. Do you have special ones? Absolutely. There are times when you want to be able to light a hallway, like a Gothic hallway, or like the castle we had in England, that whole night scene of the accident, and then that leads to underwater, that leads to his journey back to the castle. That was extremely challenging and fulfilling. And from the very beginning, as to with the AD, is you decide what shots can we do where. That was shot on maybe 4 different nights in many, many locations.
Right.
So all the logistics, how do we shoot last light of the day? How do we do the visual effects? Which shots have to be visual effects? But the other small intimate scenes are sexier, and I don't mean in a sex way, they're just, as an operator, I love being in a close-up and moving with the actor and just dancing with them, so to speak. So I really appreciate lighting that and having that shot.
And then just to geek out, so what's your favorite lens sizes?
Not a 50.
Not a normal.
Yeah. I've fallen in love with the 65 millimeter. I love. Because of our sets of primes, that's my favorite. But the wide angle lenses nowadays are so beautiful and not distorting. And you can be up close with a 29 and still see the room behind you, which is really fun. Yeah, you have to love it all. It's like saying, what's your favorite child? You have to love them all. Every scene calls for, every shot calls for something else.
So you guys mix it up and mix up your depth of field a lot.
Well, our depth of field, we always try and shoot wide open.
Mm-hmm.
The only time we're built up to 2.8 is because we need to use the zooms for whatever reason.
And what lens family is it shot on?
We have the Leica primes, Sumilex,
Mm-hmm.
and we have optimum zooms, of which we have like 4 or 5, I would say 3 different sizes, because all of our car work is shot practical. We do not tow cars. We do not very rarely put lights outside cars for several reasons. We're then free of not having to be dictated as to where in the city we can go. We can just get in the car and drive. We're fortunate enough that the cast are billionaires, so they normally have chauffeurs. So the chauffeurs are stuntmen or women.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have to worry about an actor driving.
That's great.
And that enables, and there's something about the camera and the actor both bouncing at the same time in the back of a car. And the interaction of the light as they flares, and the New York City has such beautiful lights of these new neon lights that come off of storefronts and overhead lights.
That's
so
really great.
Those smaller lenses get us in there,
Right.
and we don't have to stop and change a lens. I know that sounds lazy, but it's, we can do our pops, we can do a wider piece, and then we can still go tighter with Gregor just manipulating the camera and the zoom lens.
That's great. Well, unfortunately, we've come to time.
Really?
This has been amazing, Patrick. Where can people look at your work, etc.?
I have an Instagram, Patrick Capone DP. They can look at that.
Perfect.
My website is, like most websites now, being reconstructed. And on HBO, 9 o'clock on Sunday nights. I don't know when we're going to air. We're not going to start shooting till the end of June, so probably the end of the year.
This has been so great. You're just
thank you
like
so much.
Fountain
Great
of
questions. Great
knowledge.
questions.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Go watch Succession. It's amazing. You're missing out on a life experience if you do not look at it. And here's your IG. Thank you, Charlie, for putting that there. And we'll talk soon. And thank you, New York Film Academy, for sponsoring the 2020 series. And everyone be safe. Bye.
Bye.